meeting today is open to the public and there are no items that contain exempt information. The meeting will be webcast and a recording will be available for people to view later on the Council's website. Now, we've received 4 petitions, 5 remit questions, no agenda-related questions, and 1 statement from members of the public for today's meeting, and that's later on in our agenda. And of course, just as we always do, out of courtesy, please can I request that mobile phones and other such equipment are switched to silent so as not to disturb the conduct of the meeting. There's no fire test that's planned today, but if there is cause for one and an emergency evacuation is needed, then please do take instruction from the town hall staff, and the assembly point is Tudor Square, and hopefully it is less wet at the moment. What I'm going to do in a second, as we always do, is just turn to each committee member in turn to introduce themselves. And whilst we'll have many officers who will be presenting reports today, they'll introduce themselves at the start of them presenting. If there are officers in a seated position today, I'll also ask them to introduce themselves as well. Now, I will start out with Councillor Horner to my right. Councillor Horner.
Councillor Ian Horner, member for Bayton and Lib Dem spokesperson on transport and regen.
Councillor Richard Shaw, Lib Dem councillor for Beecham and Greenhill ward.
Councillor Tim Huggan, councillor for Crooks and Crosspool ward.
Councillor Ruth Mercereau, councillor for City ward.
And Councillor Douglas Johnson, also councillor for City ward and substituting for Councillor Diamond today.
Councillor Wright, councillor for Walkley ward.
Hi, my name is Craig Gamble-Pugh. I'm a councillor for East Ecclesfield ward.
Morning, I'm Janet Riddler, councillor for Stocksbridge and Upper Don.
Thank you very much, Janet, much appreciated. Now for our officers who are in a seated position, I'll just start with Sean to my left.
Thanks, Chair. I'm Sean McLean, Director of Regeneration and Development.
Morning, Robert Parkin, Assistant Director for Legal Services.
Good morning, I'm Amanda Clayton from Democratic Services.
Thank you very much. So item 1 on our agenda is an opportunity to receive apologies for absence. We have received 1 apology for absence from Councillor Alexi Diamond, as Councillor Johnson has just noted, and Councillor Johnson is going to be his substitute today. And from looking around the room, I don't think there will be any cause for any further apologies for absence. That would then take us to item 2, which is a standing item. It's about the exclusion of the public and press. And today I can confirm that the meeting today is open to the public and there are no items on the agenda that contain exempt information. Item 3 is an opportunity to declare any interests that members may well have. And if you do have a declaration to make, can I please ask members to state whether it's a pecuniary or personal interest and to outline the reason for the declaration. Do I see any member of the committee who wishes to make a declaration of interest? I don't, so therefore we'll move on to item 4. Item 4 are the minutes of our previous meeting, which are in our agenda pack today. Can I ask members of the committee whether they are content to approve the minutes of our previous meeting as a true and accurate record? Now, that meeting happened on the 11th of June of this year. Colleagues, are you content with approving those minutes? I can see that colleagues are nodding. There is no dissent, so therefore we will approve those minutes. Item 4. Thank you very much, colleagues. Item 5 is a really important part of our agenda and really baked into our governance system as a city. It is an opportunity to receive public questions and petitions, and all members of the committee really enjoy the contributions that citizens of the city do make in this particular section. Now, there's a maximum of 30 minutes for this item, and I'm just going to turn to Amanda at the side of me just to outline who we have coming up.
Thank you, Chair. So we're going to take the Petitions, first of all. So we're in receipt of 4 petitions today. So we have Kim Smith first presenting on behalf of Leanne Browse, and then we've got Rohit Gupta, Marina and Evelina, I believe, that have come to present. And then I don't think we haven't got anyone. Moona Noor is not here, no. And nor have we got Ibra Hussain. So we've got 2 petitions to hear today. The others will be responded to in writing. And then we're going to have 3 supplementary questions presented to us following the receipt of remit questions. Mr. Talbot's not available to attend, so we're going to read that one on his behalf. And then we've got Graham Jones and Roy Morris. And then finally we have a statement as well from Christina Rees. So if we could have Kim Smith first of all, Chair.
Thank you very much. Kim, if you're happy to, please do take a seat, and when you're ready, just press the button so that we can hear you. We'll look forward to receiving your petition that I think is presented on behalf of Leanne Browse.
That one, is that right? I apologise in advance, this is way out of my comfort zone. Our petition is addressed to the Sheffield City Council requesting the addition of a pedestrian crossing to accompany the traffic lights at the 3-way difficult to cross junction joining the next way to Sheffield Road. This area includes the Hackenthorpe tram stop, which is regularly used by children and families travelling to and from school. Despite having a 40-mile-per-hour speed limit, there is currently no dedicated pedestrian crossing along this area. Pedestrians, including elderly residents and children, have to almost guess when to cross using the traffic lights as a guide, which are difficult to see from the footpath. And sometimes on one of the roads, the traffic lights are ignored by the drivers and they use it as a give-way junction. There is no proper road safety infrastructure and no clear signal to indicate when it is safe to cross, making the crossing potentially hazardous. Within the crossing's proximity, there are 2 primary schools. There are at least 2 primary schools and 1 secondary school. We believe this location is not safe for any pedestrian, especially vulnerable members of the community. The absence of a fatal accident so far seems to be more a matter of luck than evidence of safety, particularly since there was a fatal accident recently just a short distance down the road. Our petition has currently been signed at the moment by over 400 people. Our aim is to introduce a safe crossing point and reduce the risk of a serious incident. A new crossing would help everyone in the surrounding community feel more confident and secure when crossing these busy roads. It would also give peace of mind to families when children are practicing their independence, travelling to school and home safely each day. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Kim, for presenting the petition today. I've spoken to Councillor Horner, who is in the meeting today, who's one of your local councillors, and I know that you've already been in touch with him about how best to have your voice heard. And I do, on behalf of the committee, want to thank you for bringing the community together for this really important issue about improving road safety in your area. I guess as a council, it's probably important to say, isn't it, that we are fully committed to Vision Zero, which is our ambition as a city to eliminate all fatalities and serious injuries on Sheffield's roads. Now, your request for a pedestrian crossing at this particular location where there are currently traffic lights and a pedestrian island reflects the kind of community-led action that really does drive change very often. And it's really wonderful to hear that over 400 people have signed your petition. So it's very much a credit to you and other campaigners. Now, as you'll appreciate, we do receive a large number of requests for road safety and highway improvement, particularly those aimed at improving pedestrian crossings. And whilst we'd love to deliver every improvement straight away, we do have to prioritise based upon a set of agreed criteria due to limited funding and the need to make the biggest possible impact in the shortest possible time. Now, these criteria include things like the history of pedestrian collisions, the level of fear and intimidation experienced by road users, which is really unacceptable, and how much a proposed improvement would support access to local amenities, like, for example, local schools that you've already mentioned. Now, these priorities have been agreed with councillors on a cross-party basis to help us focus on the areas where interventions are most urgently needed. Now, in terms of the next steps, your request is going to be assessed as part of the next round of evaluations and considered alongside other sites where future programmes of work are being developed. So whilst we can't confirm at this stage if or when a crossing will be installed at the location, I do want to reassure you that your concerns are being taken really seriously, and the current list of sites for the pedestrian improvement programme have already been finalised, but your request will be considered in our next round. Now, we understand, of course, that it's frustrating not to have an immediate resolution, but we really do value your input and hope that you continue to work with us as we all strive to make Sheffield streets much safer for everyone. And I think I can see that Councillor Horner would like to speak as well, because it's in his ward. Councillor Horner.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the courtesy of calling me yesterday about this as well. Strangely enough, I was passing the spot when Councillor Miskell phoned me, so there we are. That was a divine intervention or whatever. But first of all, I advised Leanne that it should bring this petition to this committee, because it really is quite daunting for members of the public to come before councillors, and that I felt that this would be better to come before this committee than to come to full council. And so, you know, thank you for making that case very well. And just to support what's been said, it is a junction there, and as you know, as well as the tram stop, and the fact that there are schools nearby, this is something we really need to seriously consider. And we also may need to look at the speed on the road, because actually 40 mile an hour is in my view too fast for that junction. And I hope that we will give this urgent consideration. And I know that we take into consideration where there have been accidents, but sometimes that feels like we're almost ambulance chasing. And I think that what is at the heart of this petition is a desire for there not to be accidents. This is an accident waiting to happen. And I think that's the key part of this petition, and I hope that we will look at it, I'm sure we will, seriously, and come up with some proposals, hopefully to meet the petitioner's request. But thank you for taking the time to support Leanne. I spoke to Leanne originally when she contacted me about it, and as I say, I do know how hard it is for members of the public to come and speak to, and you're in the council chamber even though it's not full council, and well done for doing that.
Thank you. Sorry, can I just say, we moved to that area 10 years ago, and we're literally on the estate behind it, and we avoid it. I've got small children that are now going to secondary school, and I really thank Leanne, because her children are now getting to that age, and we discussed this, and she's done an amazing job to get to this point. And like you say, there have been several fatalities in that surrounding area, and we felt that we wanted to raise it, and I wouldn't ever want there to be a fatality, especially after raising it to the council and requesting this. And I'm not a technical person, but all we're asking is that the traffic lights that are already there, that there is a clear green man, so when they do change, it just shows, especially a child or someone, you know, if someone's blind, they've got no chance. There's just some signal to clearly show that you can cross that road, because at the minute there's none.
Thank you very much, Kim, for so eloquently making the case there, and also to Leanne for putting together this petition. We really do very much appreciate it, so thank you very much.
When's the next consideration, sorry?
So
You said that it might be considered at the next opportunity.
So what will happen is that we will now score this request in line with our policy, and we will of course get back to you about that scoring process in due course.
That's fine.
Thank you very much.
Let's turn this off.
Okay,
Shut me
so
up.
that then takes us on to our next petition, which I think is Rohit Gupta and Marina, who are going to talk to us about plant-based food. Rohit, it. And Marina, if you're happy to take a seat here and press the button on the microphone when you're ready. Thank you.
Cool. Morning. My name is Rohit and I live in Hillsborough. And thanks for giving us the opportunity to present this petition. The effects of climate change are being felt all over the world, and what we choose to eat has a huge impact. Here in Sheffield, storm-related rainfall has intensified in recent years, causing homes and businesses to flood and requiring the council to spend millions on flood defences. 30% of the UK's emissions come from food, and over 70% of this comes from meat and dairy production. Furthermore, animal agriculture is the biggest driver of biodiversity loss. A recent Oxford University study concluded that a plant-based diet reduces land use by 66% and water pollution by 76%. The Council does already have a food strategy which acknowledges much of what I've said. The food strategy says that, quote, within the food system, the largest polluter is meat, end quote, and goes on to say that demand for meat needs to be reduced. But there aren't yet any council initiatives focused on this. So we're proposing 3 simple and cost-effective measures that the council can adopt. Firstly, you should lead by example and move to fully plant-based catering at internal meetings and events. Since the council doesn't do much catering, this would be easy to implement. Other councils, such as Calderdale and Nottingham, have moved to plant-based catering without cost increases. Also, in future contracts for venues that serve food, you should make it a requirement to have a majority plant-based menu. The second area where you can have an impact is on the adverts that people see throughout the city. The new advertising and sponsorship policy adopted last year bans adverts for junk foods and fossil fuels on council and billboards. This could simply be extended to include meat and dairy. Finally, in the supplementary planning documents for new restaurant developments, the council can introduce a section about food emissions to encourage them to demonstrate how their menus will offer sustainable plant-based options in line with the city's net zero targets. I hope this committee will endorse the recommendations I've laid out, which would be a step in the right direction towards a food system that's fairer, more resilient and restores nature. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for bringing the petition to the committee today, and we very much do appreciate it and for highlighting, I guess, the benefit of a plant-based diet. In fact, Councillor Gamble-Pugh did remind me this morning that I think some years ago we did meet with perhaps some fellow campaigners that you may well have nationally on this particular issue. Now, the committee does fully acknowledge the critical role the diet and food provision play in addressing the climate emergency and improving health outcomes, as you have already noted. Now, the council has, of course, varying degrees of influence across Sheffield's food system. We do have direct control over internal catering, but other areas such as schools, leisure centres and public cafes are much more complex due to the existing standards and contractual arrangements that are often in place and can only be changed when they are up for renewal. Nevertheless, these areas still offer potential for positive influence. It's also important to recognise that food and dietary choice, of course, are deeply connected to place, to culture, to family traditions, and not least also personal preference. Any actions we take must, of course, be informed by things like their feasibility, including existing guidance and cost implications, their impact on the nutritional balance of the population's diets, about environmental considerations, and of course also about acceptability to residents and staff. Now, the council's position is that all food provision within its control should be healthy, sustainable, aligned with government dietary guidance, and low in high fat, salt and sugar produce. As someone who chose to stop eating meat at the age of 12, I do feel a strong personal connection to the values behind this petition. The importance of access to non-meat options, especially in school settings, is something that I really do understand firsthand, because I certainly didn't have an adequate supply of that when I was at secondary school. Of note, of course, there are various different programmes around Sheffield at the moment, like, for example, the Eat Smart Sheffield programme that's commissioned by the Council and delivered by our partner Learn Sheffield, which supports schools in adopting a whole school approach to food and nutrition. And it includes increased access to healthier, more sustainable meals with a particular focus on plant-based options. Whilst we're not currently committed to a fully plant-based approach, we are taking meaningful local action to reduce emissions, improve public health and promote sustainable food systems, including greater availability of meat-free and plant-based alternatives for people in the city. And I do want to take this opportunity on behalf of the whole committee to thank you for bringing this petition today. You know, we don't underestimate how difficult it is to do, and also to gain those signatures needed to bring it here today, and also to educate the population about many of the important issues that you've raised. So thank you very much for bringing your petition today. Our next petitioner would be Muna Nur, and I think she has submitted a petition to install speed cameras on Stanithorpe Road in our city. But I think Amanda clarified a short time ago that Muna isn't coming today, so we'll make sure that she receives a written response to her petition. We also did receive a petition from Ibra Hussain on a variety of different issues, many of which were not necessarily covered by our committee. He's not here today, but because of the complexity of that question and its cross-cutting nature, we will make sure that we provide a written answer to Ibra Hussain. That then moves us on to the next particular item within public questions and petitions. We received 5 remit questions that have been circulated. The questioners have received written responses which have been circulated to members and published on the Council's website for those people who might be following from home today. Now, 3 supplementary questions have been received, so we're going to ask if those people would like to read their supplementary questions to the committee. And the order with which we're going to receive those, I think, are Nick Talbot, Graham Jones, and then Roy Morris. The first person would be Nick Talbot, but my understanding is that Nick has asked whether an officer can read his supplementary question, and I think Amanda is going to do that on his behalf.
Thank you, Chair. So Nick's question reads, Sheffield City Council has installed fewer than 100 new public electric vehicle charge points on city streets and in council car parks, and over the last 4 years, an average of fewer than 25 per year, and all have been dependent on central government funding via the Getting Building Fund, On-Street Residential Charge Point Scheme and Local Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Fund. I am not aware of any official target number of public charge points, but given that Sheffield has approximately 5,000 city streets and a population of 500,000 people, then a target of 5,000 would seem a reasonable minimum, providing a modest average of 1 charge point per street, with each single charge point being shared on average by 1,000 residents. At the current installation rate, it will take 196 years to install the remaining 4,900 charge points. If the installation rate were increased tenfold to 250 per year, equivalent to completing installation of a new charge point every single weekday, all year round excluding bank holidays, then reaching the 5,000 target would still take 20 years from now. Please reconcile the current installation rate with the Council's 2019 declared climate emergency response commitment for the city to be carbon zero by 2030.
Thank you very much, Amanda, for reading out that question on behalf of Mr. Talbot. So for Mr Talbot's benefit, thank you very much, of course, for the interest that you've shown in our local electric vehicle infrastructure programme, which is often shortened to LEVI. Now, because this is a supplementary question, for those people who might be following from home, it should be read alongside the original question that is available to view on the Council's website. Now, funding for LEVI has been allocated by central government to combined authorities, and as a result, the tender process is being led by SIMCA, South Yorkshire's Mayoral Combined Authority. Now, the City Council is working really closely with SIMCA and remains fully engaged in the development and delivery of this process right across our city. At present, the Council has no plans to introduce electric vehicle charge point through alternative means outside of the LEVI framework. However, we are committed to supporting the rollout of infrastructure in a way that is coordinated and in a strategic way to ensure that it aligns with our regional and citywide priorities and delivers maximum benefits to residents and to businesses. And we'll make sure, of course, because Mr Talbot isn't here today, that he receives a written copy of that answer as well. Our next supplementary questions come from Graham Jones and Roy Morris. You're welcome to come and sit together if you want, or we can take those individually. It's entirely up to you. I think the first person we go for will be Mr Jones, if that's possible. Thank you, Mr Jones.
Okay, Burnbury, oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, thank you for your reply to my original question about air monitoring. I was just that some of our Burnbury monitoring tubes have shown consistent breaches of legal limits over a period of years. We suffer from rush hour congestion in both directions on the routes to our residential districts, the Northern General Hospital, where there are 6,000 staff and daily thousands of outpatients and visitors, many of whom are unable to make the perilous and steep journeys from the current bus stops. Active travel routes to the hospital must also be developed to reduce motor traffic. The Health and Care Act 2022 embeds NHS net zero commitments by placing duties on NHS England Trust and Integrated Care Boards to consider statutory environmental and emissions targets in their decisions and work towards climate adaptation. This requires entities to have approved green plans detailing how they will achieve these targets, such as reducing direct emissions to net zero by 2040 and influencing emissions to supply chains and travel to net zero by 2045. Will the Council therefore remind the hospital of its legal responsibility to provide a safer environment for those of us living around these lethal traffic routes?
Thank you very much, Mr Jones, for your engagement today and for the supplementary question. I guess for those watching at home, it's important to say again, as we've done before with previous answers, that the response should be read alongside the original written answer that I gave on behalf of the Council, which is available on the Council's website as a matter of public record. I'm always happy to continue these discussions in meetings like this. It's an important part of our democratic process. However, the most effective way for community groups to make a real difference is by working directly with our Clean Air team. Now, I've spoken with the team and they're really keen to work with you to support further improvements in air quality in Burngreave. Now, to help answer this particular supplementary question, I asked colleagues a really straightforward question. How has air quality in Burngreave changed over the past few years? Now, they've told me that the annual average levels in 2023 and 24 are lower than in 2022 and in pre-COVID years. All monitoring locations are below the legal annual average limit of 40 micrograms per cubic metre, except for one community tuber located in the central reservation which recorded 50 micrograms. However, that location isn't considered valid for air quality management purposes as it's sited directly in the middle of a carriageway near a junction and doesn't represent typical exposure levels. That said, as we've consistently stated as a council, meeting legal limits isn't enough for us. We're focused on achieving safe levels as defined by the World Health Organization. So whilst progress has been made, there's still much more to do. I'll share the full written response from officers with you, but I won't read it out here. If it would be helpful, I'm happy to arrange that meeting between your group and the Clean Air team to go through the data in detail, clarify how we report air quality and explore how we can work together much more effectively. Now, you also raised a question about the Northern General Hospital, which is an important one. Now, I can't speak on behalf of the NHS Trust, but I know that their engagement with us, through their engagement with us over the year, that they are committed to active travel and do have a sustainable transport plan in place. They also work with our Better Points app to encourage staff to shift towards more sustainable travel modes. And I don't think they necessarily need me to explain why active travel matters. They're already taking many steps in that right direction. However, in terms of access to the hospital by active travel, our work is split between the software side of things, and we define that as kind of behaviour change, and our hardware. We basically mean that in terms of infrastructure. On the infrastructure side, I'm pleased that the Northern Community Improvement Scheme will improve bus and active travel routes along the A6135 corridor and into surrounding communities. This will help shift journeys away from private cars towards walking and cycling and public transport and support our city goals for sustainable growth and decarbonisation. Now, the scheme includes active travel routes connecting into the Northern General Hospital and nearby district centres. Public engagement on this project is due to start this autumn, and I hope that you will take part because we really do want to hear your views. Now, delivery on that particular scheme is expected over the coming years. On the behaviour change side, so that's the software side, as we use in our new walking, wheeling and cycling investment plan, we should be really proud of the work that's been funded through our Clean Air Investment Fund, which is financed through the Clean Air Zone receipts. Now, in Burngreave and the surrounding areas, this has supported lots of initiatives, for example, Mode Shift Stars, which helps educate children about health and environmental impacts of poor air quality and shift them towards active travel, and school streets as well, which improve air quality around schools and promote safer, healthier travel. I personally enjoyed launching school streets in Burngreave, and it's been a delight to work with those children and young people and school staff and families. So thanks again for your question. Please do let me know at some point if I can help to facilitate that meeting between the Council's Clean Air team and the Burngreave Clean Air campaign. Now, we're really proud of the progress that we've made, but we do know that there's much more to do, and we want to do that together.
Thank you.
Councillor Johnson.
Yes, it is me. Yes, it's not Councillor Dunn. I'm just wondering, given that we've got, some of us, someone, some ways, a rep of the council on the Sheffield Teaching Hospitals board, and I wonder if it'd be worth referring this through them, so we actually get a formal response from the hospital on what they are doing. I agree with a lot of things you described there, but I think we all know that the hospitals possibly could do more or could be clearer about what they are doing. And wonder if we could ask them to come back with a formal response so that we could include that in minutes and get back to the petitioner there.
Councillor Johnson, that's a wonderful idea. I don't personally yet know who that rep is. Perhaps you may know as well. Okay, so what we will do is we'll find out who that rep is, and we'll certainly make that case and ask them to raise that and get back to the Burngreave Clean Air campaign. I think it's an excellent suggestion as well to use the tools that we've got at our disposal as well. So thank you very much, Councillor Johnson. Our next supplementary question comes from Roy Morris. Mr. Morris, lovely to see you again, and please do press the microphone when you are ready to speak.
I think you've probably partly answered my question already, but I will ask it anyway. Many thanks for your committee reply to my question. I'm very pleased to hear that steps are being taken. Would it make sense for the work on zero emissions buses, pavement parking, school streets, etc., to be concentrated in a particular area of need, like, for example, S3, Sheffield 3 and Sheffield 4, to prove that significant improvements in air quality are possible. I say that because I think the publicity benefits of a significant reduction in one area would be good publicity for air quality work in general. And then the second question is, have the hospitals ever been asked to use income from hospital parking to fund public transport improvements? And I guess, in a sense, it's going back to what Councillor Johnson has just said about whether the hospital is taking serious measures to enforce their public health responsibilities, I guess. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your supplementary question. Of course, for those people watching at home, it's important that that's read alongside the original public question that's available on the Council's website. Now, the Clean Air Zone, which I think we've discussed in our previous correspondence in Sheffield, has helped to ensure that a significant proportion of vehicles travelling through the city now are much cleaner and meet those emission standards. And that's contributed to a reduction in nitrogen dioxide levels right across Sheffield and is something to be welcomed by all. Now, we've also secured significant funding to support our work to clean up air quality in Sheffield. Now, 10 million has already been allocated through the Clean Air Plan, and in July 2025, we secured an additional 20 million from government to bring zero-emission buses into service at targeted locations across Sheffield. Now, we continue to work with South Yorkshire's Mayoral Combined Authority, with government and with bus operators at present in a pre-franchising arrangement for our buses in order to agree terms and a delivery timescale. Now, this funding, of course, has to be focused on areas where annual average nitrogen dioxide levels are in exceedance of legal limits and in line with our air quality standard regulations of 2010. Now, wherever possible, those routes will be selected to benefit areas in the cities with the highest levels of nitrogen dioxide levels. And, of course, that would involve travelling through Burngreave at some point. On your point about schools, I guess it's important to say that schools across Sheffield have that opportunity to take part in our School Streets initiative, and we're really proud of what Sheffield has achieved as a city together when it comes to school streets. We have more school streets than any other authority in Yorkshire, and Burngreave already has several, with many planned in the future. Regarding hospital parking, of course, it is a matter for Sheffield Teaching Hospital NHS Trust, but as Councillor Johnson has suggested, we will raise that with our representative on the board of the NHS Trust as well. They do have their own sustainability plan, but of course we will raise it with them. However, I do want to acknowledge that whilst we work really hard to improve public transport and promote active travel, including in Burngreave, and will continue to do so, there'll always be times where people need to travel by car or taxi to hospitals. Now, I experienced that myself just this week when I picked up a family member from surgery, so it is important to acknowledge that need whilst also prioritising investment into improving public transport. And I do want to thank you again for your question and, of course, your continued engagement with us in this committee as well. So thank you very much for bringing your question today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I've just been informed by Amanda that our representative on the Sheffield Teaching Hospitals NHS Board is Councillor Mallinson, so we will raise it with Councillor Mallinson, who will in turn raise it with the Teaching Hospitals NHS Trust. So thank you very much, Amanda, and thank you very much to Councillor Johnson for that wonderful suggestion. Now, we did receive one statement as well, and that is from Christina Rees, and Christina is attending the meeting, and I think she's going to present it. Thank you so much, Christina.
Yes, I'm Christina. I'm a volunteer with Living Streets, Sheffield South West. I've also been a zebra for them from time to time. In hot July sunshine, the zebras from Living Streets returned. The Dazzle was doing what it does best, dancing through rush hour traffic at one of the hairiest junctions on Abbeydale and Bannerdale Road, highlighting serious issues and bringing attention to the urgent need for change. Between 7:30 and 9 a.m, a staggering 140 children and 212 adults crossed these roads. 2 months later, more than 660 local residents have pledged their support, signed our e-petition, and shown how they too are hugely concerned. The urgency to find a workable solution for the safety of all children who use this route to reach schools is all too real. Dark mornings, dark evenings, and the long-awaited rain. The rain is already here and will drastically increase risks for all pedestrians. We do acknowledge that the Council is thinking creatively around the complications of this difficult junction. And it's great news that funding for the work has been identified and ring-fenced. Please prioritise these 4 lost crossings. There has to be a solution. They are vitally important. They are needed now, today. No pedestrian should ever be seen as a second-class citizen, and children's lives in Sheffield are precious beyond all measure. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christina, for bringing this really important petition. And I think your last closing points there are really important about just how precious the lives of children in our city are. And also thank you on behalf of the committee for those really imaginative dazzle zebra outfits that we're seeing in different parts of the city, which really do draw attention to this really important issue. Now, the Council is absolutely committed to reducing the devastating impact of fatal and serious collisions on our roads. Now, that's why, on a cross-party basis, we're pursuing a Vision Zero approach that's aimed at eliminating road deaths and serious injuries altogether on Sheffield streets. Now, the response to your petition, in terms of the number of people who signed it, shows that there really is strong public support for creating safer, more people-friendly streets that prioritise the most vulnerable road users. Now, I've met alongside the Deputy Chair of this committee with campaigners from Living Streets, both from the national organisation and also from local groups in the southwest. And indeed, we continue to work together on many programmes across the city, and it's clear that we share many of the same goals. Now, at this particular site, as you've alluded to, we're working to bring forward improvements to the highway layout, and I'll be happy to discuss these plans in more detail at our next meeting with the group, but we certainly are committed to delivering a pedestrian crossing at this location. On behalf of the committee, I do want to thank you for bringing this petition today, but also the imaginative way that you draw attention to these really important issues that impact the most vulnerable in our city. So thank you. Thank you. That therefore concludes public questions and petitions, and thank you very much to everyone who has presented their question, petition, supplementary question, and also read out a statement like the one that we've just heard there from Christina. That then takes us to item 6 on our agenda, which is members' questions. Now, we have received no questions from members of the committee. That will take us on to item 7, which is the work programme. That's on page 19 of the agenda pack, and Amanda is going to take us through the work programme. Amanda.
Thank you, Chair. There are no significant changes to note in this version of the work programme. However, we did want to acknowledge that whilst we've got a well-populated agenda for the next meeting, the meetings after that have got very little in there at the moment, although we do have a long list of items with dates to be confirmed. And I think Sean may have some further information on that point for us.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Following the discussions at the pre-agenda meeting, we have got a workshop now in place with officers across Regeneration and Development and across Will Stewart's area for transport, climate change and investment. So we will look to make sure that there is a more populated work programme for the October meeting.
Thank you very much, Amanda, and also for that supplementary piece of information as well from Sean and from Will, who unfortunately can't be with us today. Do I see any comments or questions from members of the committee? Councillor Gamble-Pugh.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just an observation, it's a traditional point that's been raised over the past 3 years of this committee, which is that we are in a climate emergency, and this committee has got the word climate in its title, if not always, unfortunately, at the heart of its agenda items. I'm just wondering why it is that we haven't got enough business to kind of fill the agenda, because there are things that need doing. I wonder, are we properly resourcing the teams who are working on these issues? Is there anything else that we can do to bring forward? I appreciate that for things to come to our agenda, there's a huge amount of work that officers need to do behind the scenes to do the legwork and the preparation to get things before us. But that we need to kind of apply ourselves with the urgency that the issue demands.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gamble-Pugh, and I can see that other colleagues perhaps are also nodding about that particular issue and the severity and urgency of the climate emergency that's before us, and I think it's a really important point. I guess to set it in context, today on our agenda we do have a variety of different items, all of which have a significant climate impact. We are receiving additional fund from the South Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authority in order to be able to develop an additional forward pipeline of schemes, many of which will promote active travel, which will help decarbonise transport in our city. Later on in the agenda, we'll be considering a 20-mile-an-hour scheme, and we know that that does have an impact when it comes to both road safety and improving air quality and climate in our city. And finally on our agenda today, we're receiving a report from the climate team in the Council about Built for Change. So the idea that we are going to be working with schools in order to better prepare them for the challenges of the climate emergency and build in mitigation. So making sure that there are fewer days lost in schools to high temperatures, to extreme flooding events, and all sorts of other things as well. So there's lots on our agenda today that has a climate kind of lens, but you're entirely right that we need to do much more work as an organisation to properly fund and properly deliver when it comes to our climate commitments. Councillor Horner.
Yeah, just a quick point, Chair. Given that we've got some light agendas, does that then mean that we are going to get the Red Myers Road 30-mile-an-hour speed limit item that we asked for in the previous meeting brought to a future meeting fairly soon?
Councillor Horner, we do not have anyone from that particular service in a seated position at the moment, so it might be difficult to get an answer to you directly at present. I think if we can take this offline and get those assurances outside this meeting, then we certainly should do. But I think that message has been heard, that you want to see it delivered as soon as possible, and you want to see it being brought to this committee. So colleagues, noting many of those comments that have just been made, do I see that the members of the committee are content with approving the work programme as it is? Yes, I see that colleagues are nodding. Thank you very much, colleagues. We've therefore approved that work programme going forward. Item 8 of our meeting today is an opportunity to hear one of the first substantive items on our agenda, and it is the 2025 to 26 Quarter 1 Budget Monitoring Report. It's on page 31 of the agenda pack, and Jane is going to take us through it today. Jane, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Jane Wilby. I'm the Assistant Director of Finance and Accounting for the Council, and I'm here to present the 25-26 Quarter 1 financial position. The report you have is a copy of the paper that first was presented to the Finance and Performance Committee on the 18th of August and has been shared with each policy committee this month to ensure transparency, strengthen governance and ensure accountable decision-making is made across all service areas. The format of the report has changed slightly with a more visual reporting approach presented in the appendix, where you can find some further information on the committee-specific budget areas. At Q1, the Council's forecasting a year-end general fund overspend of 28.2 million, which is driven primarily by persistent demand pressures in adults and children's social care, SEN transport and homelessness, alongside the pressures in the dedicated schools grant and the housing revenue account. To partially offset this, 22.8 million of corporate mitigations have been released into the outturn position, which include 7.9 million for housing benefit subsidy loss, 5.1 million for high-cost placement growth and 9.8 million from the 24-25 collection fund surplus. The report also covers some of the targeted recovery actions that are in place. The Council's launched a series of service-level programmes and corporate financial measures to reduce the overspend. These include the adult social care efficiency reforms that are led by the Chief Executive through the Adult Social Care Improvement Board. In children's services, they're reviewing care placements, investing in in-house provisions and improving home-to-school transport. And in housing, we're continuing to reduce temporary accommodation costs by minimising bed and breakfast placements and accelerating permanent housing transitions. The Committee for the Transport, Regen and Climate Committee is forecasting an overspend of 100,000 versus a net revenue budget of 36.1 million at Q1. The committee is currently managing several budget pressures, with the main drivers of overspend including income shortfalls in building standards, planning applications, income and overspends in development management due to employee costs and also additional costs relating to the local plan. Vacancy management across various services in the committee budgets is helping to temporarily offset these pressures, alongside some increased permit income in highways network management. The planning service is taking a proactive approach to manage the overspends and is currently working with external consultants to review fees and charges, to expand the service cost recovery and benchmarking pre-application fees, and is increasing lobbying efforts to ensure a stable market. Service leads are actively engaged in the budget management process and are working with finance teams to support that financial stability. In response to the overall financial position, the Council's introduced organisational wide spend controls, which include a 6-month recruitment restriction, which is expected to save 6 million, with a further 3 million from vacancy factor budgeting. We've also introduced discretionary spend restrictions and with a centralised monitoring process. Both recruitment and discretionary spend measures have a clear exemption criteria in place to ensure a pragmatic approach is taken when managing these controls. We anticipate with the targeted and corporate measures in place, we can drive that overspend down to a position of under 20 million by the end of the year. Finance teams are actively monitoring and driving these targets down with services. The measures are coordinated across governance forums, including the Future Sheffield Board, Performance and Delivery Board, and the Budget Improvement Group, ensuring strategic alignment and accountability. As we face these challenges, the Future Sheffield Transformation Programme has become even more vital in reshaping council services towards a more sustainable and efficient operating model. It's important to recognise these pressures are not unique to Sheffield. We are actively engaging with national consultations on funding reform and welcome the government's commitment to a 3-year local government finance settlement from 26-27. The longer-term funding horizon will enable us to put our budget strategy with greater confidence, particularly in contrast to the current approach, where annual funding allocations are only confirmed in December, just before the financial year begins. We expect to receive further detail from government in November 25, which will be critical in shaping our forward planning. While the position is challenging, the Council is responding with urgency and focus, and sharing this financial update with each policy committee ensures that transparency, it strengthens governance and does enable accountable decision-making across all service areas. The next quarter's update will be presented to the Finance and Performance Committee in November and all policy committees in December. I'm happy to take any questions.
Councillor Huggan, but before I just go to Councillor Huggan, can I just clarify, of course, this report is circulated to all committees, and I think you alluded to that at the very end of your presentation, and I guess that is in order to make us all aware of the wider Council's corporate financial position and situation. But can I also just clarify, because for people following at home, sometimes it's quite a challenge to be able to understand, but much of the spend for this particular committee is capital funding that comes from government and from Simca, and of course couldn't be repurposed for various other different pressures that the council and city has, like for example adult social care or home to school transport or SEND. Is that the case?
Yes, this committee does deal with quite a lot of capital expenditure, and there is a clear distinction between capital and revenue expenditure. So capital, obviously developing assets, and revenue is the day-to-day running of operations. So the overspend that we're talking about is related to the general fund, which is the revenue account for the council.
Thank you very much, Jane, for confirming that. Councillor Huggan.
Yeah, having served on another committee, I mean, I know this is our only opportunity to talk about this, because every year, the last couple of years, we've had overspends in certain committees, then we vote for a council tax level which is based on what the spending expected, but it's always overspent. It's this fantasy figures that we're getting from the other committees that we can't materially match. This is the thing, is I see certain committees that are, you know, so when we're voting as councillors in February or March or whenever it is about our council tax level, we then find that just months later that certain committees are over budget. But isn't it more realistic that we actually say that this is where the figure is going to be? Because there's a total mismatch of these two committees which overspend the other committees with every year. And so how do we get into this position where certain committees are overspending, but we know they're going to overspend? I'd rather be given the best figures possible that are realistic in February and March when we're setting the council tax, rather than having months down the line that we're overspent on those committees yet again. When, you know, it can't be, you know, I can predict that if we carry on this way, that we're going to have an overspend on those two committees this time next year, which is going to be substantially over what the council's budget, unless we start being a bit more realistic about the figures. Because, you know, I just can't get my head around how this can be the case year after year on this, and it's not good enough.
Thank you very much, Councillor Huggan, and I guess much of your comment is probably for this committee to know, and probably is for other committees to be dealing with as well. However, as I understand it, and perhaps Jane may be able to offer some reflections, I think this future Sheffield programme will perhaps change many of the ways that we achieve savings in this organisation kind of going forward, and Jane may well have some reflections in order to be able to share.
Believe me, I share your frustrations. It's not like we want to be in a position where we are reporting overspends. I absolutely do agree with the point that you're making. We are obliged by law to set a balanced budget, and when we come to set that budget each year, we do believe that that is a balanced position. Clearly this year we have experienced another surge in demand, which actually happened outside of the planning cycle. So particularly in the Adult Social Care Committee, what we saw was an uptick in demand in autumn, which was, we'd already kind of set the budget based on the baseline cost in that committee's budgets. So the growth then happened, and we hadn't accounted for the level of growth within the budget. So we're already starting off at a baseline position that wasn't actually achievable, which is why we're in the position we are this year in social care. We're obviously experienced significant amounts of demand pressures and growth in cost budgets as well. So, you know, cost of living, inflation, national living wage, it all you know, comes through in the cost that we experience as the council. Councillor Miskell's right in pointing to the Future Sheffield programme, because absolutely the strategic aim of that programme is to bring about financial stability in the council, look at our operating model to ensure that we're operating as effectively as we can be. But the longer term planning horizon that we're going to be have in future will help us to be able to plan on a longer term basis and really get to grips with what baseline budget positions are going to be alongside the Future Sheffield programme to kind of align those budgets and right size them for the financial envelope that we've got. There's still a huge amount of uncertainty in the funding arena at the moment. We don't know what that fair funding settlement's going to look like until late November, early December. So we're still going to be kind of, you know, planning worst case scenario, but it is a very, very challenging position to be in for local authorities in general. And yes, we are trying to get our budgets back on a stable footing. So that's why we've got organisation-wide controls in place to try and bring the budget back this year. And then for next year, it's become ever more important to get that budget right and setting the budget right in the first place for next year and beyond.
It's just like it says a deja vu. I saw another committee this time last year, and we had the same budget overspends. You know, this is why I hope we get this right with the, you know, the settlement. There's more long term, because we do need to get this right, because we can't career from this year after year. And you know, and the thing is, I don't want to be this time next year on whichever committee I'm on, then getting a similar report about budget overspends on the same two committees. It's just, you know, it just needs to somehow be rectified, because otherwise, you know, the trend line, etc., needs to be adjusted. I know you're looking at it within the council, but it's just we need to be on a sound footing, because otherwise it's going to go disastrously wrong sometime in the not too distant future.
Thank you, Councillor Hogan, and I think you do note, don't you, the mention on page 31 in the executive summary about the government's commitment to introducing that multi-year local government financial settlement for 3 years from 2026-27, which we've long since argued for, I think, on a cross-party basis in this council. Councillor Horner, I think you had your hand up.
One part of this budget which continues to rise is home to school transport. I know it's not the responsibility of this committee, but there is the word transport in there. And the reason for that is because it's a legal requirement for the council to provide home to school transport for SEND pupils if it's requested. I raised this matter 2 years ago when I was on the education committee. The council is paying for taxis at the moment, and I do not think it has been given sufficient thought to alternative means. I talked about, well, what about community transport, minibuses, etc. And yet we're still seeing this budget continue to rise. Taxis are not exactly the most sustainable form of transport. I mean, that is why our group moved an amendment about assisted travel trainers and so on, and I believe that's now been anyway taken up by the council. But that is an example of what Councillor Hogan was saying. This is something that is continuing to rise, and if the authority doesn't come up with more imaginative solutions that meet the needs of the pupils, because I recognise this is a need, then we're going to have serious budget deficits.
Thank you, Councillor Horn. I'll just go to Councillor Shaw and then come back for any reflections on kind of the actions that the council is taking at the moment to deal with some of those budgetary pressures. Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. In the report, it says working to basically get the deficit to below 20 million, whether that's 15 million or 19.5 million. Could you tell us what the current level of the council's reserves are at the moment, and is it realistic to expect that we can easily set a balanced budget next year without further cuts to non-statutory services or even statutory services?
And I'll just go also to Councillor Gamble-Pugh, but of course, Councillor Gamble-Pugh.
Thank you. Just before I chip in with what I wanted to say, Chair, can I clarify? Are we currently fielding questions for a response from officers, or are we moving into a political debate between elected members?
it appears to be kind of an amalgamation of both, but I guess in the interest of moving forward as quickly as possible, we could hear either from you.
Well, what you'll hear what you hear from me. I just want to be clear. My contribution is not a question that requires a response. My points are a response to this sort of very strange, hand-wringing, puzzled posing of the questions from the councillors opposite. I have to say, I think this is the first time that I've been on this committee in a meeting where Councillor Huggan has been here. And I just wanted to emphasise that in the 3 or 4 years this committee's existed, we've always managed to kind of rub along and work across party lines and look for where we agree. However, when it comes to the point about it's not good enough where we are with the council's finances, I think there seems to be some confusion about who's actually in charge and who's running different tiers of government from time to time. The reason we are where we are is very much largely to do with the decisions that were made by their party when they decided to form a coalition government with the Tories and embark upon a 14-year period of swinging austerity cuts to public services, which have then meant that need has increased. What we're now trying to do is to invest in early intervention in those people's services so that we can get the need down, get the demand down, and get the public finances back in order. We also seem to be confused about who is it that's not good enough. Who's running this council? As far as I was concerned, it was a coalition between 3 political parties, of which theirs is one. So we need to be clear about that. And yes, we do need to work hard to get those public finances in order. But pretending to be confused about what's going on and who's in charge is not going to be part of the solution.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell-Pugh, and of course it is important to confirm, isn't it, that this council is run by a 3-party administration involving the Greens, the Liberal Democrats and Labour as well. Now, in terms of those 2 questions from colleagues, I think we had a question from Councillor Shaw about reserves, and we also had some questions and reflections from Councillor Huggan about home to school transport and the budgetary pressures there, noting that it doesn't fall within our committee. And I'll just go to Jane for any reflections that you may well have about the corporate response on that.
On homeschool transport, it's a significant area of budget pressure, and I know it's been discussed in other committees. There is some targeted recovery work that's in place. There's daily stand-up meetings. The aim is to reduce the amount of taxis that we are using as an organisation. It's not the best for the families, and it's not the best for the environment. It's not the best for our budgets either. So there's many reasons for that. There's a lot of complexity in fleet. Our fleet management and how we manage the capacity that we've got within minibuses, we're utilising travel trainers. There's lots of actions in place that are happening, but it's very difficult to kind of wind that back in a really short space of time. So it's going to be, we're going to see improvements in that budget area, but it's going to take a while to for that to flow through. In terms of the reserves question, we do have usable reserves of almost 300 million. Now, a lot of those are ring-fenced and earmarked reserves, so we have already set aside and kind of defined what we're going to use those reserves for. So as part of our financial planning and financial strategy this year, we need to look at those in a different way. Clearly, last year and over the last 4 years, our strategy we'd earmarked a specific reserve to manage budget overspends. We'd called that budget contingency reserve, which we had used that to kind of as a bit of a buffer when we had got overspends. We're managing things differently now, and we've not got a specific reserve for that. It's too early to say how setting the balanced budget is going to be for next year. We will set a balanced budget, however we're going to do that, and that I am confident that we are going to do that. How easy that's going to be is a different question, and again, that depends on the detail that we get on the local government settlement, which will come late November, and we'll get the details in December. So until we know what we're dealing with, it's very difficult to say how actually we're going to plan for that in the future. In terms of how we're going to fund deficits in this year. Until we've got that information, we can put those pieces together. We can then start thinking about actually where do we need to use our reserves differently. And as part of this year, we've identified we've actually used 9.8 from our collection fund surplus, which normally we would have put into reserves. We've looked at that level of reserve for the collection fund and said, actually, we think that's adequate for the level that we need. And that's why we've kind of taken it into the out-term position. So we have to be quite agile with our financial planning. And I think it's prudent to wait for the financial settlement before we make any strategic decisions on our reserves and financial planning going forward.
Thank you very much, Jane, and thank you very much, colleagues, for the contributions that were made there. The recommendations for this particular report on page 32, it's asking the committee to note the updated information of the 2025-26 revenue budget outturns as described in this report, including detailed committee budget monitoring information and management actions provided. And 2, to note the targeted actions and work underway to bring the in-year forecast overspend down. Are colleagues content with the recommendations as outlined? I can see that colleagues are nodding. I've got thumbs up, so thank you. That will therefore be approved, and there's been no dissent from colleagues. Thank you very much, Jane, for bringing that report to us as a standing item on many of our agendas. Item 9 is an item about the acceptance of additional City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement Revenue Grant. And it's on page 53 of the agenda pack, and our presenting officer is, it says here expected, but actually is David Whitley. David.
Thank you very much, Chair. So the report in front of us seeks acceptance of additional 902,000 CRSTS, or City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement, revenue grant from the South Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authority, who I'll just say are SIMCA, if that's okay from here on in. This is outside of the remit of the report on the general fund that has just been shared by Jane. Again, I picked up your points about capital and revenue. This is revenue, but it is a revenue grant that doesn't affect the council's general fund. It's welcome that SIMCA are providing this additional money to enable us to start developing new and continue developing existing schemes in advance of the next round of capital funding, which is expecting to start in 2027. We feel that we'll have some more clarity on what this next round of funding means for Sheffield around Christmas this year. The funding will also be used for programme level costs and other complementary activities, including policy development. As an example, the City Centre Access and Movement Plan that has recently been out for an additional round of public consultation has been funded by this CRSTS revenue allocation. The appendices include tables that set out the funding profile of the spend over the years and expected outputs that are expected from the funder too, as well as a copy of the actual detail of the agreement itself with SIMCA for the full 3.759 million. The report covers the additional 902,000, which takes us up to that 3.759 million, all of which needs to be spent by March 2027. The recommendation is to accept the additional grant from SIMCA, but I'm happy to take any questions in advance of the committee taking a decision.
Thank you very much, David, for bringing this report today. I've seen one colleague who wishes to make a contribution, Councillor Johnson.
Thanks. I just want to say it's great being on this committee as a stand-in if you just get to accept unsolicited offers of money. I think all committees should have this privilege. No, it's actually really good. I mean, I think what's important about this is about building up the pipeline, and I guess we can't emphasise too much how we really need to have this pipeline of projects, because actually from the days of Boris Johnson you could always get money for things when spades were in the ground and there's a photo shoot opportunity, but actually doing the really important hard work behind the scenes to get to that stage, which is massive, yeah, that's always what you need the money for. I was just going to ask, is there any downside to this? Because I can't see one.
Thank you very much, Councillor Johnson, and I think, as you would probably say, and as you said in other committees, it's probably stonkingly good value, I imagine. I will just go to another colleague as well, Councillor Hogan.
No, this is all to be very welcomed. My only worry about the future and accepting future money is how much money is going to be diverted to the already announced 160 million, which I think is just the what is it, the first tranche of money to go to Doncaster Sheffield Airport that means that in the future we may get less money than we otherwise would do. Anyway, that's the only thing that I'm concerned about. I welcome this. I think it's really good. But, you know, for future tranches of money, you know, there's an awful lot of the Mayor's budget going towards DSA.
Thank you very much. We've got two questions there, and David, it'd be good to have your reflections, particularly about Councillor Huggan's question there. I think you alluded to gain share that the City of Doncaster Council was drawing down from Simca in order to support Doncaster Sheffield Airport, and the difference with this particular form of funding, and whether those two things are the same or not.
So I'll answer the more straightforward question first, if that's okay. And that's, is there a downside? Yes, there is a small downside, and the small downside is that we do have a funding agreement with, you know, with Simca. If we don't meet either the outputs or the timescales, you know, within that funding agreement, you know, Simca have the, you know, have the right to not, you know, to claw back an appropriate amount. So yeah, there's an element of pressure. But generally, it's really encouraging, obviously, to hear it is a positive, because, as I said in the introduction, I think it is a positive. In terms of Councillor Huggan's question, this particular funding is coming from the 1.6 billion that has been that has been announced for a South Yorkshire level. I'm aware at a South Yorkshire level that there are a number of larger projects that that are likely to be key beneficiaries of this particular funding, in turn including the Mayor's aspiration for moving towards public transport being back in public ownership, and then obviously particularly that affects ourselves and Rotherham, a significant investment in the renewal of the existing Supertram network. As well as I'm aware that there's some additional work going on to see whether that network can be expanded, which I know is an aspiration of the committee. In terms of the detail of where the funding and whether that's the start, the medium or the end of contributions to Doncaster Sheffield Airport, I don't know that level of detail, if I'm honest. I could certainly get in touch with colleagues at the Mayoral Combined Authority, but as I say, we're expecting, in terms of the specific fund that we're talking about here, which is City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement, we understand that we'll get a better idea of what that means for Sheffield, and consequently all of the other districts, around South Yorkshire, and also the elements that, as we've been discussed, are being used for the bigger, more strategic projects around the county. We should know that by Christmas.
Thank you. I think it's probably important to add, isn't it, that as you said, this is part of that 1.5 billion pounds that the UK government has given. That was announced to do two big things, wasn't it? To renew the tram network, but also to prepare us and take us to bus franchising. And this is a small section of this to help us develop a forward pipeline of schemes. As I understand it, Doncaster Sheffield Airport, that is supported by Councillor Huggan's party, just as it is supported by my party in terms of the investment that we're making to our city, comes out of gain share. We remain having access to our own portion of gain share to use in Sheffield. This is simply Doncaster drawing down its share of gain share from the Mayoral Combined Authority to be able to spend on Doncaster Sheffield Airport in the future. So, two particular points there from colleagues. Do any other colleagues have any other kind of questions or contributions? I don't think so. So that therefore takes us on to the recommendations of this particular item. Now you'll be able to see this particular item and the recommendations from page 53 onwards. Do I see colleagues that colleagues are content with approving this particular item and its recommendations? Yes, I do. Thank you very much, colleagues, for item 9, and thank you very much, David, for taking us through that. Item 10 is about the Sheldon Road 20-mile-an-hour scheme. It is on page 73 of the agenda pack, And the presenting officers are Lisa Blakemore, also supported by David Whitley as well. And the report recommendations are on page 75.
Hi, committee members. So this is much more small scale than what you've just been hearing about, but very important to local people, I'm sure. So this is for the extension of the Brincliffe 20-mile-an-hour scheme that you heard this year to include Sheldon Road. As part of the consultation response for the Brincliffe scheme, many local members and residents asked that Sheldon Road be considered for inclusion. We didn't want to delay the main scheme being introduced, so we took that decision and started on site with that scheme. And pending this being agreed, we will start to make Sheldon Road 20 miles an hour. We've had one objection to the speed limit order, as you'll see in the main body of the report, just saying that this road is often heavy trafficked and people can't get to 20 if they tried. As we know, these schemes are much more about physical speed and achieving great neighbourhoods. The safety that people feel when they're in these types of schemes is much more important to people, and that came out with the countless emails I've had in the main Brincliffe scheme to ask that this road be made 20. So the recommendation is that the Brincliffe scheme be extended to include Sheldon Road. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Councillor Campbell-Pugh and then Councillor Shaw. Councillor Campbell-Pugh.
Thanks, Chair. It's particularly now that Councillor Sanger has moved on to greater things and is no longer sitting amongst us here, it falls to me alone potentially to raise the perennial point that whilst we absolutely endorse the overall strategy of rolling out 20-mile-an-hour zones across the city, that it shouldn't fall to us as a city-wide policy committee to wrangle over the details of how these schemes are implemented, because we don't necessarily know the areas. It's a happy coincidence, for example, when a questioner comes and Councillor Horner ward is affected, but most of the time that doesn't happen. And there are more appropriate decision-making bodies within the local authority where this should be could be taken. For example, the local area committees where things could be delegated to. And whilst we don't want to delegate the notion of whether or not we have these strategic priorities, again, if we could have a little bit less of the micro detail coming to this committee and a little bit more of the macro stuff about the climate emergency, then that would be much better in my view. Thank you.
Thank you for making that point. I think also it's important to update members of the committee about work that's happening behind the scenes in order to tidy up our kind of scheme of delegation. And the hope is to bring us in line much more with other authorities of similar size around the country, whereby schemes like this that fit in with our strategic priorities as a city can be signed off by officers in consultation with councillors as well. So to speed up the process where that fits in with our city-wide priorities, and these 20-mile-an-hour zones that are hugely popular and well received around the city are, and hopefully it will help speed up the process. As I understand it, that at present is involved in discussions with both legal colleagues but also the governance committee in order to bring that forward. But I think we've made that clear on a cross-party basis that we'd like that to happen sooner rather than later in order for us to be able to deliver on that citywide transport vision that we've all agreed to on a cross-party basis. Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. I'm afraid Councillor Campbell-Pugh beat me to that point about delegating to local area committees. As Deputy Chair of the South LAC, I think this would have been an ideal scheme for that committee to decide, if only to save time for this committee. Lisa, thank you for the report. I think the 2 emails of support and 1 objection is possibly sets a record for the fewest number of comments on the scheme that's come before us before. Could you kind of reassure us, as it were, that the council has done everything within its power to publicise the scheme, to engage with local community and local councillors, because I know it's a very diverse community, and making sure that everyone is included and has the ability to feedback.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Shaw. So in line with our traffic regulation order process, obviously we have statutory obligations, which are street notices on the physical road itself with all the details. And we now have QR codes that link directly to the plans and allow people to give us responses that way without having to write letters, send emails. It's a direct response via QR code. We also sent letters to everybody on Sheldon Road, had it on our website. I don't know if people with this scheme kind of took it for granted that they'd sent in some correspondence for the main Brincliffe scheme, which we did have quite a lot of correspondence from. And sometimes when people are happy with schemes, they tend to not be quite as vocal as people who are not so happy. So I do wonder, because the two consultations were fairly, back to back, whether people thought, I've had my voice in the Brincliffe, they've obviously listened to me because they're now doing this consultation, my job is done. So we do have other schemes where the response rate is really low, and I do worry about that for some of the reasons you just quite rightly highlighted. But I do think with this particular case, it was just because it was the back of the big Brincliffe consultation that we had.
Thank you. I mean, we're bearing that in mind, maybe on the kind of the notification letters that go out in future, like make it clear that if you've had your say on another scheme, legally, the council can't consider that objection or that thing of support on this other scheme because it's legally distinct. Would that be a possibility?
Yeah, and I was saying to Councillor Musa before we started the committee meeting that we're evolving our letters basically every single time we go to consult for those exact reasons. You learn from every consultation. In the letter, I did tie the reason we were doing this to the Brincliffe scheme to let people know that it weren't just out of the blue, it weren't just a generic letter. But I agree with you, we could say that if you have already commented on Brincliffe, please note that you will have to re-let us know your thoughts as part of this time window for it to be considered. So absolutely, I'll take that forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And just before we go to Councillor Mersrow, I think there was another point that you made that was a supplementary effectively to what Councillor Campbell-Pugh said, and I think that does suggest that perhaps there is a little bit of contention in the committee that we need to tease out outside this space with regards to that scheme of delegation for schemes like this. The proposal on the table at present was to bring us in line with other local authorities where there was agreement on a citywide transport vision and where there was our strategic priorities for decisions like that to be made in consultation with the lead members from different political groupings, but that to be signed off by council officers. Now, that was a suggestion that was made on the basis of being able to deliver at speed and within budget as well. And I guess I would just caution, and we probably do need to have a discussion about this outside this place, I would caution about delegating issues like this to LACs on the basis that it may inadvertently slow down some of these decisions that we make and add additional cost and complexity. So perhaps it's something that we should pick up outside this place, because I think it is an issue that perhaps there's a little bit of contention. As I understand it, there's also a governance workshop tomorrow, and delegation work is apparently on their agenda. So please do raise this with your members of that particular committee, because I think it's something that they should be discussing as well. I'll just go to Councillor Mersrow.
Thank you. Yeah, really happy to approve this TRO to extend the 20-mile-an-hour scheme. We know from Wales that 20-mile-an-hour schemes show a reduction in collision injuries. I've looked at our own data dashboard, and I found that in Sheffield in the last year, for which we have data, which is 2023, all fatalities and 88% of serious injuries were on roads where the speed limit was 30 miles an hour or more. So really happy to reduce the speed limit here, and I think it's conclusive proof of the need to reduce speed limits on Sheffield's roads. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mersrow. Do I see any other colleagues who wish to make a contribution? I'll just go to Lisa for any final reflections before we consider this item.
No, nothing from me, thank you.
Well, thank you very much for bringing this to us today. The recommendations for approval are on page 75 of your agenda pack. I'm going to ask colleagues whether they're content to agree to those recommendations. I can see that colleagues are nodding, so therefore that item has been carried. Thank you very much, Lisa, in particular, for bringing this item to us today. And we look forward to hearing more about that governance workshop tomorrow about delegation work that is on their agenda. So that therefore takes us to item number 11, which has the very snappy title of Prioritisation of Locations for the Camera Enforcement of Moving Traffic Offences, and it is on page 95 of the agenda. Ben is going to be leading on this item, and perhaps supported by David too.
Morning, members. Vision Zero is at the heart of our transport policy. It's a recognition that even one person killed or seriously injured on the transport network is one too many. The City Council is investing significant sums of money to achieve Vision Zero through engineering works to enhance the safety and accessibility of the network, and through a large-scale education programme through which we engage with school children and young drivers across the city. However, it's an unfortunate reality that engineering and education alone can only do so much. And in trying to achieve Vision Zero as quickly as possible, the enforcement of moving traffic restrictions on the highway network is often required. The enforcement of moving traffic offences can have wider benefits, particularly with regard to reducing congestion, and ensuring band turns and box junctions are adhered to helps ensure traffic keeps moving at busy intersections and thereby reduces delays and frustrations amongst drivers. Sheffield was granted powers to enforce moving traffic offences in 2023, and there are many moving traffic offences for which enforcement is permitted. But this report today focuses specifically on band turns, box junctions and school streets. The report details the criteria we will use to determine if camera enforcement is appropriate and how we will prioritise locations for enforcement given the finite funding available. As such, it provides an evidence-based and transparent prioritisation process which will maximise the cost effectiveness of our investment in camera technology. If approved, the policy will enable us to generate a priority of a programme of interventions and roll out the popular School Streets initiative more widely, and also allow us to see key junctions operate more efficiently, reducing delays, reducing congestion, whilst improving road safety. It's proposed that the first school to benefit from camera enforcement would be Broomhill Infants, and that would enable us to introduce a school street, whilst band turns and box junctions will be enforced initially at Queen's Road, Hawley Street, and at the Hanover Way and Glossop Road junction. Thank you for your time, and I welcome any questions.
Thank you very much, Ben, for this really important piece of work. Do I see any colleagues who wish to make a contribution? Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ben, for the report. On the criteria, looking through the criteria, it says these locations must meet at least one of the criteria to be considered. Is it that locations basically get a point per criteria they meet, and then those that meet multiple criteria are at the top of the list and those that not at the bottom of the list? Is that
absolutely? It's as straightforward as that. There's no weighting involved. It's literally which location ticks the most boxes in relation to those criteria.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mesereau.
Thank you. Just a request really for the future. I noticed that Sheffield doesn't currently have any plans to use the moving traffic offences to enforce roads with weight restrictions. Apparently Wigan Council have trialled this and Kirklees Council are doing this too. I'm wondering if we could look to do this in future as a way to reduce collision injuries and deaths.
Absolutely, that's something we could explore, and it's my intention to review the current road safety strategy over the coming months, and in doing so look to introduce a freight related safety policy in there, and the enforcement of moving traffic offences relating to rate is something we certainly will consider.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson.
Thanks. It's really welcome. You know, it's been a long time we've been talking about moving traffic offences. It's really good that Council's now got powers, and it's good to see them being used. The 8 criteria for the moving traffic offences set at 216 actually seem really, really sound. I was just thinking of it. So a very common location is where there's been the new transport improvements making a massive difference in terms of safety at what we always call Death Junction, and it's Rutland Road going up to Burngreave, where they cross over Neepsend Lane. It's a very popular crossing now as that area's developed, and of course it's due for future development as part of the Homes England project. So that would be a prime location for this, and I mean, it's just that we get lots of requests as councillors where people saying, actually, I had a very near miss with pushing a pram out there. We're getting, you know, repeated regular breaches of this. It's a new banned right turn and banned left turn there, so that'd be really, really welcome. What I wanted to ask about is about the sort of what seems like quite a slow lead-in time. So and I don't think this is a formal decision for today, but it's mentioned at 7.3. We're indicating, you know, there'll be 6 months after setting the cameras up, where there'll just be warnings given out and no fines levied at all. And just my concern is that given that locations like Rutland Road are one where we know in practice that there are people regularly going through as repeat offenders, just because they know they can get away with it. If we basically tell people they've got 6 months where they're not going to get fined, it's just going to give people carte blanche to go ahead and do that. I'm just wondering if we could, when it's taken away, whether we could look at reducing that 6-month period. I don't know if you want to address that first. I just got a complete unrelated thing about the school streets thing, if I can come back to that.
I think that would be very welcome, Ben. I think some clarification, particularly on the kind of 6 months exemption, because actually it is a bit technical and complex, and that might not necessarily apply for those people who are repeated offenders. It would be simply for the first occasion, I think, wouldn't it?
So that's absolutely right. Sorry, we've had a bit of a conversation about who covers which bit of the question, because I think I probably got a little bit more of the background around the Rutland Neepsend junction with Douglas, and potentially even have a point of order for for Robert in terms of a question based on if one of the recommendations is approved. But yes, in terms of the 6 months, what the situation is the warning notice period is for 6 months, but if for example you went through the camera site on week 1, you would get a warning notice. If you went through the camera site on week 3 of that 6 months, you would then get a penalty charge notice. However, if you went through for the first time in week 15 of the 6 months, you would still just get a warning notice. So as Councillor Miskell rightly says, it's a little bit more nuanced. What it isn't saying is that you get carte blanche for the first 6 months just to go through to continue going through the enforced camera sites. Just in terms of the detail of the Rutland Road Neepsend site, as you'll see in terms of the report, one of the things that we were keen to do was to enable enforcement from day one on new, particularly larger capital transport projects, of which the interventions that you've referred to at Rutland Road and Neepsend Lane is part of a scheme that is substantially complete but not yet finished. We've not yet undertaken the after counts. So I'm sure in terms of what you're saying, in terms of the abuse at those junctions is there, but we don't know how much it is yet, nor within the current funding profile for the project. Did it include 4 camera enforcement at that junction? So, in terms of the I guess the points of order from my perspective, if it's approved, if what we're saying here is approved today, and there's flexibility within the contingency of an existing capital project budget, would that enable us to put cameras in if the scheme can afford it? For a scheme that has now been substantially complete, or is the decision today for schemes moving forward?
Thank you very much, Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, I just want to go over that. Actually, that's really reassuring. That does clarify that. So, just in terms of your last point, I just checked back the recommendations. I don't have any problems with the recommendations here. Appreciate there's some more things to be taken away behind the scenes there. But with the, so essentially it's first offence, you get a warning. After that, then it's taken seriously. That's actually really welcome. Perhaps I didn't draw that out of the report there. Yeah, I think it is really important. I think this is a really good example, actually. I'm just going to make a quick point that this is something that's really additive. So where we've actually had a lot of investment, got some good schemes in, where feedback from residents and businesses there is that, this is a big improvement in the area. That is what people are saying. But this would just help polish off some of those things where new niggles arise. That's good. I just got an unrelated question on the school streets. I wasn't sure. Ruth, did you want to come in now?
It's a very... Oh,
sorry.
It's a very quick one. I didn't catch the initial sites. I was wondering if you could just tell me what they are again. I couldn't see it in the report either. So,
initial site for which we'll use camera enforcement of a school street will be Broomhill Infants.
the school street, and for the other sites as well. I think you mentioned a few others.
For band right turns, the initial sites will be Queen's Road and then Hanover Way, Glossop Road. And in terms of a yellow box junction, that will be Hawley Street.
So Sharesmore Road isn't on the list anymore because that was there previously.
So Lisa's actually sat behind us as you know as well. So the initial three sites have already gone through the capital approval process and are being implemented as we speak. So they were down at Shelsmore, they were at Queen's Road at Shoreham Street, and then the final one was the left turn, which I think is one of the critical ones from Glossop Road, from Upper Hanover into Glossop Road, which is very akin to what Councillor Johnson was talking about at Rutland Neep's End. And that's been an ongoing issue since 1994 when the tram network came in. And over time we've tried, before we had camera enforcement powers, a number of additional things to try and highlight people's awareness of that ban turn, including additional signs. But obviously it was still prioritised on a casualty reduction basis as one of those first sites, so it's still an issue despite that additional signing. So as a committee rightly said, I think the ability for us to enforce through camera enforcement is welcome. But no, what Ben's talking about here is above and beyond the sites that we've already gone through capital approval for to actually deliver.
Thank you very much, Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, thanks. So the separate point I had was on the school streets thing. So I'm just looking at page 101 that sets out the criteria for the school streets thing at 2.24. And the last one of those bullet points, really important, where schools with existing school streets, where physically marshalling the restrictions is difficult to maintain from a safety or personal security perspective. And I think that's just really important to reflect on, because that's a real thing, that people out there who are supervising children walking to school actually get physical threats, physical attacks sometimes, racist abuse, and that comes from the sense that actually it's okay to drive your car through a line of children and there's a right to do that, despite the fact that there clearly isn't a right. There's a traffic regulation order there. So it's a really important thing that, if that support can be given with school cameras, and I know that some of us have looked at that, colleagues, campaigned on the need for school cameras quite a bit there. What I really want to ask was, fitting in with the community strategy, can that be read in the sense of where there are, if like, unpaid volunteers doing that role? So typically in some schools, and there's more than others, there are parents and helpers who will actually staff those school street closures. Whereas in other schools, it's entirely done by paid staff like head teachers or caretakers or whatever. But where there is good community involvement and people are actually facing up those risks of abuse each day, can that be taken into account?
Absolutely. the use of cameras to enforce school streets is an important tool to supplement the work that volunteers and people in education undertake on a daily basis. The preference is for school streets to be manned and have a tape across the road. It provides that physical barrier and there's an opportunity for engagement between staff and students and parents. But the enforcement of school streets through camera enforcement is a supplementary tool and to be used in those locations where there is not that ability to man a particular entry point or provide some sort of assurance for when that volunteering ability is not available, resource is not available. There's still that enforcement tool to be utilised.
Thank you very much. I'll just, unless Councillor Johnson wants to clarify something, just turn to Robert for the legal perspective on the question that I think was raised by David a short while ago. But Councillor Johnson, was there anything else?
Well, just on that, I mean, in terms of community safety, I just wonder, is the usage from the cameras being able to be shared with the police for evidence where there are crimes of things like public order offences, assaults, threatened assaults, things like that? Is that a supplementary use of the cameras? I genuinely don't know.
So I think I can answer that, but I'm also going to wait for see if Lisa wanted to chip in as well. I think the bottom line is no. They're cameras that have got an element of artificial intelligence, that pick up specific specific van movements. So it's not a case of it being CCTV that is almost constantly running or is constantly running. It's not an observed system where you've got somebody, literally in a sat watching the video going on. The images will be captured. They'll be sent back to colleagues at the City Council. There's still a requirement for issuing penalty charge notices by cameras for them to be, manually reviewed. Before the penalty charge notice is then issued. So in terms of the kit is quite clever in terms of what it can enforce, but it's not got that more that more general opportunity for the police, for example, to tap in. That said, it will give us some intelligence. Obviously, as you implied earlier on, it will give us some intelligence as to what's actually happening where within that junction, but within specific transport movements, not generally what's happening within the wider environment.
Thank you, and we'll just go to Robert for clarification on some of the legal points there.
So David might need to correct me, but my understanding is essentially around the budget point, is it?
I think it's particularly it's also the point of when the decision is made. So could we do it? Could we put in cameras? Retrospectively on a scheme that is substantially complete, but not yet complete. Because obviously it's gone through this committee in terms of programme entry, but then obviously also through the policy and resources or finance committee through the capital approval process. So the scheme is substantially complete. That made those changes at Rutland Road, Neeps End. So does that mean that we could now look to put cameras in there because we didn't have this approval to do that in advance of when the scheme originally came forward through its full business case, which was over 12 months or so ago now, or is it only for schemes moving forward?
So the recommendation talks about new schemes, doesn't it? But the committee is empowered to make decisions on infrastructure and capital expenditure. The requirements are that there's budget to do so. There's some commentary in the report about schemes that they would need. I think it's the programme budget it talks about and the capital budget. So I think if there was a desire today to actually introduce camera enforcement on schemes that, strictly speaking, may not be new schemes, then we could potentially tweak that wording, couldn't we? I think that the key point is that that there's budget to do so, and that it is infrastructure. Yep.
Yeah, and that's a really helpful clarification. It's not saying that we can do it. It's just, is it worth us as a project team in terms of continuing the final elements of delivery of that scheme? Is it worth us then considering a change of scope to to consider camera enforcement. If the answer was the decisions today and it's only new schemes moving forward, we wouldn't even consider it. It's just if there's an option, based on a slight amendment to a recommendation from the committee, it's certainly something that we can do. But as you say, it all depends on whether there's money available to do that.
So I think the recommendation therefore would be that we would consider as a committee an amendment to the recommendation for B, presumably, and at present it says to approve the introduction of camera enforcement associated with all new schemes which include a band, turn or box junction. I'll just turn to guidance from Robert, but presumably that would be approve the introduction of camera enforcement associated with all new schemes, or legacy schemes where funds permit, which include a band, turn or box junction, or other similar form of wording that might be cleaner.
I think that captures it, looking at David, so thank you for covering that.
Would colleagues be content with accepting that? I think if all of us were to agree that that would be an addition to the recommendation, we could proceed. I'd be very happy to propose that formally as an amendment. Could I have a colleague who'd be happy to formally second that? Councillor Johnson, as he was his proposal in the first place. However, Councillor Huggan.
Have we got enough cameras? And is there a budget implication for this? That's all. I mean, just before we go rushing in, I mean, I'm happy with the recommendation if those two, because there's no point in sort of almost promising that we're going to put cameras in all sorts of places when we haven't got any.
I think that the spirit of the amendment there would be budget permitting, so it would open up the opportunity for us to consider legacy schemes if we did have the budget in order to do so, and this committee was minded to do so. So I guess it would prevent it being a barrier or an impediment to us kind of looking at schemes in the past rather than simply looking at schemes that were planned in the future. Let's just go to some clarification from colleagues, perhaps from transport colleagues.
Yeah, so I can certainly help with that. As the pertinent question that Robert asked again in terms of the committee around funding, and I think is covered by the amendment. So what we're not saying is that we're promising that we will do this across the board using the prioritisation process. What we would be looking at doing is using existing approved budgets within projects that are at various stages of their life. Some are very early on. Some are going through optioneering. Some are going through public consultation. And the example that Councillor Johnson referred to is a scheme that is coming towards the end of its the end of its life in terms of the construction. What we're saying is, if there is money within the existing established approved budget by the council, we could look to increase the scope to enforce in that location. What we're not committing to through the additional text is suddenly saying, yes, we've got £1 million to put in an extra 35 cameras at prioritised locations. We're not saying that. We are saying that we can go back to project teams and say, if you feel that increasing the value of the benefits in terms of some of the schemes that have recently been put in there would be added value in camera enforcement, the recommendation based on today's decision now enables us to do that. Whereas in the schemes that we're talking about with Councillor Johnson, that wasn't an option when we were going through the business case process for that scheme, because obviously the decision will hopefully be made today.
Councillor Huggan, does that therefore satisfy your question?
Yeah, yes, it does. It's just because I know when we had the Westway scheme, the issue was when the camera could go in, when it would come out, and that sort of thing. And that was my slight concern, is that parents would have an expectation, potentially, if it wasn't worded the right way, that they'd get some camera enforcement when they're not.
Thank you very much, Councillor Huggan. I'll just go to Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, I think we are all on the same page there. So first of all, I mean, in my view, the recommendation is fine as it is, but equally, I'm happy to second the words that you devised there to add in, just so it's absolutely clear. I suppose the good news about this is in the case of the scheme I was describing. So it's one that is largely complete, but definitely not actually complete. There is some work to go on still. The advantage of this is that it certainly gives some powers to officers to do something rather than a requirement. It doesn't make any promises. But it also means that if there is some money left in that pot, then it is possible that we could effectively get some extra camera enforcement without taking away from the others. So that's actually really positive. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Johnson. And just for the avoidance of any ambiguity, I think Robert's just tidied up the wording there, and it's just in front of me. So it would be B, to approve the introduction of camera enforcement associated with all new schemes and legacy schemes, provided that sufficient budget exists, which includes a band turn or box junction. That's been proposed and seconded. Do I see that all colleagues are in support of that? If there's any dissent, please do raise your hand. I see no dissent, so that therefore has been carried as an amendment, and when we vote on it in a short while, that will be kind of part of the substantive recommendation. David.
I think just for the avoidance of doubt, I was just going to say where there is an existing budget within that project, because otherwise, arguably, going back to Councillor Huggins' comment, people could say, actually, do you know what, the council has a discretionary budget through the local transport plan that we could allocate all to camera enforcing legacy schemes. I think where I was coming from was the schemes that have already got capital approval, and there is money within that budget to enable camera enforcement. I was just maybe hoping to make it really clear that it's within existing project budgets for those legacy schemes.
And thank you for that, David. So we've just played around with that, and we think that this would work in terms of meeting the criteria that you set. So it would say, and legacy schemes, provided that sufficient allocated budget exists. Would that satisfy your requirements?
Yes. We could even go as far as saying approved, but if you wanted to allocate it, provides a little bit more of a flexibility.
Excellent. Councillor Johnson, and then we'll very quickly agree that this is the way forward if that's what the committee's mind is.
It probably is. This is going to sound incredibly pedantic. It might depend on where the comma was that you read out. Because the difficulty with introducing something that mentions budget in something that is only about empowerment, and budget is addressed in a different criteria. I mean, you could actually just leave out the words about budget, because they will be dealt with otherwise. I don't know what Robert thinks of that. I think we're only talking about where there's budget available on schemes already funded, and so not to take away or not to impose any additional limitations on all the other schemes which don't have a capital budget associated with them by definition, and therefore you could end up in a circular argument about, you can't do this because there's no budget, and there's no budget because it hasn't been approved.
So would it help if we added the word scheme in then? Allocated scheme budget?
Well, or just take out the reference to budget, which I don't think you need. Robert, maybe I could ask you to advise, and then maybe I'll shut up.
Robert, I'll go to you. We always enjoy having Councillor Johnson substituting in our meetings. Thank you.
So the wording as proposed and refined is to approve the introduction of camera enforcement associated with all new schemes, comma, and legacy schemes provided that sufficient allocated budget exists, comma. So the budget point is in relation to legacy schemes. I think that's a fairly firm interpretation. That's to meet the concern that was raised about the need for budget. I think that's a helpful clarification. I don't think it means that the proposal is unworkable, and insofar as it offers some clarity on a point of doubt that was raised, my suggestion is that it remains, but Chair, down to yourself.
I would vote for both commas.
Excellent. I can see that we're in agreement about the wording that Robert proposes. Colleagues, are we happy to accept that as an amendment so it falls into our substantive? Yes, absolutely. Okay, so let us move forward. we're taking a vote on this particular item, which is, of course, really, really important. I guess we know, don't we, that congestion costs the UK economy £30.8 billion a year, and it's an issue that we as a council are determined to tackle head on. So the recommendations are on page 97 for your approval. Are we all agreed? Colleagues, thank you very much, and thank you very much for the discussion about where the comma should be. It is quite important, actually. Let's go to item 12, and thank you so much, Ben and David, for that particular item. Item 12 is Built for Change, and it's on page 109 of the agenda pack, and our presenting officer is going to be Victoria Penmore, and I think Mark Whitworth is also going to be supporting as well. Thank you very much, Victoria. Feel free to introduce yourself and introduce the paper. We really appreciate you coming today.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'm Victoria Penman. I'm a Sustainability Programme Officer in Sheffield in City Futures, and I'm the lead for the Built for Change programme.
And I'm Mark Whitworth. I'm the Service Manager for the Sustainability and Climate Change team.
Thank you. I've got some slides which I'll go through if that's okay. So if we can move on to the first of the main slides, that'd be great, please. Thank you. So this report is in two parts. So the report starts with an introduction to the Built for Change programme, including the rationale for the programme and an update on progress so far. But the main purpose of the report is to get the authorisation of the committee to create a grant fund to provide financial support for settings on the Built for Change programme. Next slide, please. Thank you. So just to give a bit of context, climate change and the need to tackle it is having a significant impact on schools, early years providers and post-16 education providers. So education organisations emit a significant amount of carbon emissions, so there's a clear need to reduce those. And the education of young people is also crucial to developing the workforce needed for a transition to net zero. The Department for Education expect that all education providers will have a climate action plan in place this year, and we know that settings are really struggling with this, along with all the other demands on their time and resource. I'm here, however, particularly because of the impact that the extreme weather has on schools and other education providers. So many schools and settings across Sheffield and the country are already experiencing the impact of climate change and the extreme weather that creates. Many of our schools and early years providers and Sheffield College are experiencing extreme heat. Flooding is less of an issue for schools in Sheffield, but many are experiencing surface water flooding issues, drainage issues, and some are at risk of river flooding as well. A further point is that schools that are adapted to extreme weather are in a position to be safe places for the young people that are within them. Children are particularly vulnerable to extreme weather. This is particularly the case for young children and for children living in poverty, children with health issues and special educational needs, and children with challenging home lives. For these children, it's even more important that their place of education is able to stay open during extreme weather conditions and can give them respite if the conditions at home are challenging. Next slide, please. So when funding became available from the Public Health Reserves Grant, decision was made to allocate £505,000 for staff time and financial support to create a partnership programme to support educational settings to adapt to increasingly extreme weather. So the aims of the programme are to provide financial support and expertise to help education settings and young people and communities which are particularly vulnerable to the impacts of extreme weather, and help them to adapt to the increasingly challenging conditions. The additional aim is for us to be able to lever in and accelerate additional funding on top of that additional £505,000, an additional resource, additional expertise to increase the impact of the funding. Next slide, please. So the programme is a true partnership involving a number of partners you can see at the bottom here. And a steering group was created, including elected members from this committee and from the Education, Children and Families Policy Committee, to set up, to take the decisions which affect all partners. This includes the decision on which partner settings would be supported. So I think we've not moved on. Yes, that one, thank you. I won't read out the name of all the settings. They're all settings with high proportions of children living in multiple deprivation. Most also have high numbers of children with SEN and high levels of children from ethnic minorities. I'm just going to give a little bit of an update on progress. So next slide, please. The programme is still fairly early on, but we've already had quite a lot of progress learning already. I'll just go through a few highlights. I won't read through all of these on here. So key progress is that 10 of the 12 main settings have received audits from School Climate Action campaign Let's Go Zero, and their draft climate action plans are in development. We're going to be meeting with those schools over the next few weeks to discuss the recommendations and finalise their action plans. The drought we've experienced over the summer and the periods of extreme heat have really demonstrated the challenges that settings are experiencing. Let's Go Zero have been visiting schools during those times of those heat with kind of temperatures of over 25 and 30 degrees in some of those classrooms. A programme of activities being developed to involve young people from the secondary and college settings in the Council's annual takeover week, including attending the Built for Change steering group. And that's a week when young people are involved in council activities, council decision-making, and decision-making, so in this case with partners as well, to give them a real genuine voice in this decision. The final one I'll highlight is that a grant application is currently being developed by Sheffield Hallam for submission to the Maximising UK Adaptation for Climate Change Hub with a view to increasing the learning and enrichment offer for schools. Next slide, please. So thinking about the interventions and solutions that we're able to fund through this grant, so we're looking at around about £20,000 per setting. This probably won't completely solve the situation for most settings, but it can make a really significant difference. So we're getting expert advice from McDonald to identify the most suitable solutions for each of the settings that we're working with. And we met with them yesterday around talking about heat, and some of the recommendations we talked about include reflective window film, roof insulation, which would obviously also save school energy costs, heat reflective paint on kind of playgrounds or kind of areas near kind of windows where heat has been reflected up into classrooms, shade structures, ceiling fans, ventilation improvements, and rain storage planters. Some of the solutions we're looking at actually can be surprisingly affordable. So, for example, one pilot school has already retrofitted window film recently on some of their building for less than £3,000, and they've experienced a notable difference in the temperature in the classrooms affected. As well as what we can pay for with that funding, a lot can also be achieved by simply using buildings differently. So, for example, opening windows at night where possible, and that can be a difficult thing to do, but there are other behavioural changes which may also be possible. And we'll be working with the pilot settings and with other settings across the city as well to try to achieve behaviour change and can share some of that information. Some of the behaviour changes are a bit counterintuitive. So those don't cost anything, but achieving behaviour change can be really difficult. So that might be the more challenging part of the programme than actually the funding side of things. Next slide, please. So this is my final slide and comes to the main purpose of the item, which is to ask the committee to approve the creation of a grant fund to provide the financial support to these 12 settings on the pilot, which aren't already receiving financial or in-kind support from a partner other than advice. So the funding is primarily for physical interventions to help the setting to adapt to extreme weather, and those interventions should also benefit the well-being of students, whether directly or indirectly. We're asking the committee to approve a fund to support 12 pilot settings on the partnership programme with grants of around £20,000 per setting. That's to include the purchase and installation costs of solutions identified in climate action plans, as well as there's an optional contribution to teaching and learning responsibility payments or staffing costs to help make this more deliverable for schools. Settings will be issued with a grant letter with conditions, and support will be provided to help them to commission and project manage their interventions. We're really keen to keep this as light touch and supportive as possible, and we're recommending a grant fund as the best approach because it's likely to be better value for money and more agile than commissioning and project managing interventions in-house. And our market research, or kind of our consultation with schools, suggested this is a suitable solution for them as well. That's all I have to say, so thank you very much, Chair and Councillors. I'd be very happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Victoria, for this great piece of work. Colleagues, do I have any questions or comments? Councillor Mersrow, and then Councillor Huggan, and then Councillor Horner.
Thank you. It was really interesting hearing about the different interventions and use of the buildings. I'd be really happy to support the grant funding for the 12 pilot settings. Listening to your report, I was especially struck by how important it is for children and young people to have safe places to be, especially if their home life isn't safe. I'd be interested in hearing a bit about the behaviour changes that you mentioned as well. But on an aside, in section 4.3, you mentioned the day one engagement and art project. I can really recommend to members of the committee seeing this exhibition. It's excellent. It's really worth seeing if you get the opportunity. It was in the Winter Gardens. I'm not sure where it is now, but thank you. Yeah, I'd be very happy to support the grant funding.
And thank you. And let's just take Councillor Huggan and Councillor Horner and then come back from any reflections. Councillor Huggan.
Yeah, no, fantastic. My only concern is, obviously, do you say full or part funding? What if because schools are really strapped for cash at the moment, what if they can't make the rest of the money up? That's my concern, because they're probably likely to be some of the worthiest projects. And how are we going to deal with that? That's just something that concerns me, because obviously this is fantastic, the work you're doing, but obviously it's the staff and the pupils at all these schools that obviously get a benefit from classrooms. Because I've had, when I was chair of governance before, we were bequested a brand new school that overheated because it was built on HUF principles, and then there's no ability for the pupils to cool down in their classrooms when it overheated. So that's just my concern is, what about the extra, when it's a part fund and then the school or the academy can't afford the rest?
Thank you. And Councillor Horner.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm very happy to support this. I think it's really important to reach out to pupils and get this message across, because I think we're in danger sometimes of thinking that the very loud voices that are growing negative voices on the question of climate change are reaching young people as well, and we do need to counter that. I think we're kid ourselves if we think it's a problem, a generational problem. It may not be, and so I welcome this programme, and I echo the thoughts of Councillor Hogan about school budgets, having been a school governor in the past.
Thank you, Councillor Horner. I do have Councillor Johnson Campbell-Pugh, but I'll just go to Victoria for any reflections on those points from Councillor Mersrow, Councillor Huggan and Councillor Horner.
Thank you very much, Chair. So, Councillor Mersrow, In terms of behaviour change, so it's still fairly early on in the programme. We met with Mott MacDonald yesterday, but some of the kind of types of behaviour change we might expect to see, say, is around kind of ventilation, so opening windows, particularly at night, because when you've got the cool air entering the building at night, that can cool, obviously cools the building in advance of the morning. So that can be quite difficult. Obviously, there are concerns around security, which we need to address, and kind of potential insurance implications. But these can be insurmountable, particularly for some settings if they have particularly high windows and things like that. Other things, other types of behaviour change can include the way that way children are engaged, so encouraging different types of play when it's particularly hot, or opening windows on kind of the right side of the building. So if you have windows opened on the south side of the building, you may find yourself letting in more hot air. But if you have things open on kind of the north side, it may be cooler there. Similarly, kind of creating kind of airflow, changing kind of ventilation, heating settings, those types of things. So it's quite a wide range of things we can do. And for that, it's more an education issue. So I haven't gone into great detail about the programme, but it's fairly extensive. We also have a Built for Change network, which reaches out to additional schools that aren't being funded. And so for those, we'll be able to kind of provide education, information, kind of webinars and things like that, peer support from other settings who are involved in the programme. So hopefully be able to implement some of those behaviour changes further across Sheffield as well. In terms of the exhibition, the day one exhibition, it's a brilliant exhibition. It's going to be at Green Estate over half term. I know that one. It will be coming to the town hall, I think, early next year. And there are other settings. Our Sustainability and Climate Change newsletter, which can be found from our web pages, announces kind of the dates of those. So I'd really encourage anyone who's listening or hasn't signed up to that to sign up, and then we can kind of keep you informed of those things. In terms of schools that can't pay for the full intervention, what we say that obviously the funding is limited, so we'll be encouraging schools to use the funding to cover interventions which either are fully covered, or if, for example, they've got a parent-teacher association that can kind of draw in additional funding, looking at that. We'll also be kind of looking at all the interventions that we're recommending for all the settings overall, and looking at what other funding opportunities there might be for us to apply for. And so part of our time within the team is likely to be used to apply for funding for kind of a number of settings on their behalf, or on individual settings, but ideally kind of collectively. So that's kind of how we'll be looking to address that. We can also use the information that we're gathering to inform kind of more systemic decisions. So, for example, we know that there are settings, as you mentioned, that where there are new buildings where they're already experience overheating. So where we've got schools that are on rebuild programmes, we'll be looking to engage with colleagues in education and with the Department for Education to make sure that the issues that we're identifying are addressed in new build specifications. So that kind of £20,000 per setting is kind of hopefully the smaller part, and hopefully we'll have more systemic kind of impact as well. My final one, Councillor Horner, in terms of reaching young people, yes, absolutely, it's really important. Young people will be engaged in the climate action plan development. Quite a lot of the schools have already got things like kind of eco clubs and that type of activity where they kind of educate children. There'll be a number of educational interventions that are available to settings. So, for example, Yorkshire Water have interventions, have kind of learning interventions that they come into school, or where young people can go out to settings that they talk about kind of the water cycle. We're also looking at bringing in, creating an intervention and the funding that we're applying for at the moment is to create some climate adaptation specifically, learning opportunities, potentially based at a voluntary sector organisation in Sheffield as well. So there'll be quite a wide range of ways we'll engage them we're also looking at how we can engage young people in skills and skills education as well.
Thank you very much. I've got Councillor Johnson and then Councillor Gamble-Pugh. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks very much. Yeah, this is obviously an excellent scheme, so very welcomed. Two brief points. One is that actually this shows that what you can do with relatively small interventions. You know, they don't have to cost a lot. At the end of it, it'll be really good to have a showcase of all the sort of different, quite creative and varied things that have been done there. So just the idea about reflective paint on roofs and playgrounds, low cost. But also, the second point is that children have got a great capacity for being engaged with that, and sort of the multiplier effect is that if you're showing children in primary schools what can actually be done to tackle climate change and their comfort and well-being and health at that age, that is a lesson that will probably last with them from school all their lives. So very welcome.
Thank you very much for those positive contributions, Councillor Johnson. And then we've got Councillor Gamble-Pugh.
Thanks, Chair. This is really great. I think the last time we were looking at some climate action plans in this committee, I said, I think we're getting to the point where we're a bit fed up of action plans, but it's really good to see some practical action plans being facilitated within the schools. I have a question which is about the balance between adaptation and mitigation, really, because I can see that the initiative clearly supports adaptation and pupil well-being. I just wondered, how can we ensure that the schemes and the schools' action plans also contribute meaningfully to the broader climate action goals across the city in terms of reaching net zero?
Thank you, Victoria. If you're happy to cover those questions from Councillor Johnson and Councillor Gamble-Pugh.
Thank you, yes, as well, and I'll pass on to Mark for the last part of that question as well. So, Councillor Johnson, what we can do with small interventions, yes, absolutely. So it's really, it's been really interesting to see how much we can change, particularly with the behavioural change side of things. And I think there's also kind of real opportunity to look at some of the some more innovative interventions and how they might be applied in schools. So, for example, the example of painting tarmac was something that came up yesterday, so it's very, very new as a potential one, but I don't know whether that's been looked at in school context, so I think there's also potential for kind of doing some research with some of these small kind of potentially innovative interventions as well, which would be great to do. We're definitely keen to share the learning as much as possible, so we're looking at, say, peer support opportunities. Each of the settings will be kind of encouraged to provide a celebration event at the end of the programme, which will be open not only to families and local communities, but also to other schools in Sheffield, so other organisations can come and see what's been happening. Also, talking about engaging children, I also mention as well that we're looking at developing kind of community learning and engagement, so that a lot of these schools have kind of things like coffee mornings where they engage with their local community. So we're looking at reaching local communities through that as well to try and help to change behaviour and support local communities, again, to kind of reduce the heat in their homes during hot periods of weather. As I say, a lot of what is ideal is counterintuitive, so if we can try and help change some of that behaviour, then that would be really positive as well. And I'll start off with the final bit around kind of the balance between net zero and adaptation. So the funding for this particular project is from public health reserves and is specifically around adaptation. But we're working with Let's Go Zero, who are working with the schools to develop their climate action plans. That includes both adaptation, but also particularly net zero. So that will be as well as skills and curriculum and nature and water as well. I think those are the main areas, and food. Food within net zero. So it's quite, the information and the advice they will get will be quite broad ranging from Let's Get Net Zero. We're really keen to encourage interventions which have dual benefits, so whether that is benefits for the children's learning, so for example kind of an outdoor kind of play area, outdoor kind of classroom area might be suitable for some, but also if they've got potential net zero benefits, that's another really kind of keen area we're really keen on. So for example, ventilation is one of the areas that's come through, insulation, both of them. So ventilation is more around kind of the air quality benefits, but obviously insulation, if we're insulating then we're reducing energy use as well. This is, and so we're also kind of identifying all the kind of issues through this, but there are other programmes that we're working on which are focusing more on net zero. Mark can talk a little bit more about some of that work that's taking place.
Thanks, Victoria. Yeah, so just expanding on that a little further, there's obviously, as Victoria's outlined, the opportunity within those settings to explore opportunities to look at climate adaptation. So the sorts of projects which is outlined, but alongside that, some of those interventions like roof insulation, which was mentioned as one of those interventions for keeping the heat down in the building, but then has a benefit of actually reducing the heating costs for that school as well. The other thing that's working alongside this programme, we've also got the Local Renewable Energy Fund programme, the LREF, which currently there's a programme of 11 schools, educational settings and other buildings as well within the council estate that have been developed in terms of interventions, including solar PV and other work which will actually reduce the energy consumption or change the energy consumption in those buildings. And then the other piece of work which we're also developing is, you'll be aware that we had approval from Strategy and Resources Policy Committee towards the end of last year to develop a climate bond issuance. So we've been developing work around that particular programme, and that will look at, as I said before, we've been working in that with the GFI, the Green Finance Institute, with Abundance, who the platform who manage local climate bonds on behalf of, I think now it's something like 18 local authorities that have been through that process. Notably Bristol, which just raised over £1.5 million around 6 months ago to invest across their own estate as well. And part of that programme will potentially look at schools as well and the opportunity around developing out solar on school settings, on maintained schools. So that includes conversations that we've been having with other organisations, so local community groups, but also recommendations from those groups around working with national bodies like Solar for Schools as well, who deliver those types of programmes. So again, it's seeing where there's the opportunities to develop both the resilience and the adaptation programme, but also expanding the projects as you described earlier on the ground, actually physically taking place as well.
Thank you very much. Do I see any of the colleagues who wish to make a contribution? I don't. And Mark, thank you very much for spotlighting that final point that you made about the work that we're doing with solar for schools to help lower energy bills in schools and decarbonise school estates. I think one thing that I would say, just kind of as a closing comment on it, I've been a teacher now in the city for almost 2 decades, and I kind of remember back to various different extreme weather events in 2022. I know that so many schools in this city were closed because of rising temperatures. That was days lost for learning in schools. It means that kind of lives were disrupted. It means that children's life chances were unfortunately decreased as a result of that lack of learning and those lost learning days. But also, if we cast our mind back earlier on in my career, I think it was 2007, and we had those floods in Sheffield. Again, schools closed in large parts of the city, days of learning lost. So therefore, it's really good that we're bringing forward this particular project, and it shows just how timely and needed it is. I think it's also important, those conversations that many members have discussed today, that this will undoubtedly spark with young people when they see interventions being brought in their schools to mitigate some of the extreme impact of climate change. Those conversations that we have alongside young people and with young people are so important as well. And also, I guess some of those dual impacts as well. We can't forget about the dual impacts that some of these measures may well bring about in lowering temperatures in schools, but also perhaps also helping to make sure that the winters are not so cold for schools as well. That will mean more money spent on books, computers and teaching assistants in our schools, so it will have a real practical impact for young people in classrooms and other educational settings. So, colleagues, if we are content with approving this particular item, the recommendations are on page 111. And can I ask colleagues whether we're content with agreeing the recommendations for our approval? I'm seeing that we are unanimously in support of agreeing the recommendations there. So thank you very much, Victoria, and also Mark, for bringing this particular item. That item has therefore been carried. Colleagues, that brings us to the end of our meeting today. It's very much appreciated. Thank you very much for your support. I think later today we also have a briefing as well, so I look forward to seeing some colleagues there too. Thank you. Bye-bye.